The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Suckling on the teat of tech.
With Paul Brislen.
Let's talk high-tech with Paul Brislen. Paul Brislen on Twitter. G'day there, Paul.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. First up this morning, Google released yet another product to Gmail users.
Yes, yeah. This is a brand new feature called phone calls. So basically, what you do is you turn Gmail into not just an email inbox and a place where you can coordinate all of your general Google-based stuff, but you can add in phone calls to that as well and start making phone calls from it at rather good pricing. It's basically aimed at tackling Skype, of course, and the voice-over IP market, which is the future of all voice calling, really, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, which is currently my app of choice if I'm going to make internet calls, and obviously I use Skype quite a bit on the show as well, with guests coming through. But here's another option. You could, I guess, it's free from Gmail to Gmail, and then a fee if you're calling landlines.
Yeah, it does appear they're offering a bit of a special deal of free calling to certain locations and from certain locations at the moment. But basically, they're talking about charging, much as Skype does, pennies per call for international calling. And I would hope that you would eventually be able to get a geographic number, one that says where you are in the world, and permanently keep that, so that you could have a Gmail phone number, so that people can call you potentially from a normal phone as well.
I may never leave my inbox. I might just stay there.
That's it, really. Exactly, and that's what Google's after here, is not just so much to offer yet another service, but to integrate it all into your inbox, so that becomes, your Gmail page becomes a place where you go for everything. What we used to laughingly call a portal back in the 1990s, because that was the place you would go to get all your information. You get your news, your weather, your email inbox, and now phone calls as well. Whether or not that takes off, you've really got to then take it to the next step and mobilize it and personalize it and make it something that everybody can use on any device. So you just basically sit down anywhere and become quite device agnostic. Whether it's a cell phone or an iPad or a laptop or a desktop or whatever else you can come up with, that'll be the next step, really, to integrate them all together. We've been talking about it for a long time, but it's really quite interesting to see it actually starting to take off, and it'll be interesting to see whether this does capture the attention of the users, because, as you say, most people are quite happy with Skype at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the video calling features as well, which you can actually now do inside Gmail as well. So, yeah, it definitely is head on, so it'd be interesting to see what else they come up with.
Well, that's right. I mean, who else is Google going to take on this year? They seem to be taking on Apple, Microsoft, all the search engines, of course, they've long since dominated, but they're getting into all these other areas as well, and giving everything away for free in the hopes that somehow they'll make money. They seem to make quite a lot of money, so I don't think they're too worried about that.
Somehow,
somehow, I don't know quite. Maybe they're just printing it.
Maybe they will be finding out what their next purchase is at TechEd in New Zealand.
I love that as a segue. There we go. Yes, so Microsoft's big TechEd conference, which is probably the biggest technical conference on the calendar each year in New Zealand, is on next week here in Auckland. If you'd like to go along, I'm sorry, but you're far too late. They sell out the tickets in minutes. It's like a rock concert. They get 2,500 people in, and generally speaking, people start planning next year's one as soon as they've been through this year's one. There are about 170 streams of work, I think, so you can pick and choose from quite the smorgasbord of work streams. It's all fairly technical. It's all designed for people who work with work on Microsoft products and develop for Microsoft-based applications rather than for end users. But at the same time, there are usually 2 or 3 big standouts. The first one is the keynote speakers are usually really cool. I went a few years ago and heard from a guy who's a marine biologist who'd gone down to the wreck of the Titanic in a mini submarine.
Wow.
And that was fascinating. I mean, that was absolutely astonishing to hear the tale of all of that. So the keynotes are usually pretty good. The second thing is you find out an awful lot of info about the plans for what is basically the operating system and the applications that most of us still end up using. And thirdly, you get to find out what the bag is.
What the bag is? You get a bag?
You get a bag. You get a bag as a delegate, as an attendee. You get a bag, and the bag is the single biggest talking point of any tech ed. You know when there's a good bag because you can't find them for love nor money, and they're treasured.
Yeah.
If nobody really likes the bag, then there's mass movement to try and swap it for something else, and much wailing and complaining. Some years it's a backpack, some years it's a laptop bag. One year in particular, very controversially, it went for one of those courier kind of sling things that went over your shoulder. And once upon a time at Computer World, we ran a front-page story comparing all the bags through history, and I have never seen so much correspondence on a single subject in my entire life.
I want a bag.
People really care quite deeply about the bags.
Oh, I'm not going, but I want a bag.
You want the bag, and I'll tell you who else probably won't be going to Tech Ed either. It will be the meter maids that were quite prominent in the Australian Tech Ed, which was held last week.
Tell us what happened there.
Well, a slight problem. Microsoft, all these tech companies and at big tech conferences tend to have booth babes. So these are the girls in the skimpy outfits who either roller skate around the place giving out lanyards and key rings and squeezy balls and mouse pads and things of that sort. Microsoft had meter maids, and they, I don't think, paid too much attention to what was going on, but the girls turned up Vegas style wearing bikinis. And Microsoft employees and quite a few of the delegates, because let's face it, these are guys who don't get out of mum's basement terribly often. No, that's a bit cruel. Sorry, Ben Gracewood. I'm sure you get out of mum's basement once in a while.
Yeah.
They took umbrage at the level of the amount of flesh on display and said, guys, come on, this is a serious business conference. We really need to be jollied along with Vegas-style antics. Thanks all the same. And Microsoft's taken quite a PR hit over in Australia about it.
Yeah, and now Microsoft have also claimed that they knew nothing about these, or the costumes the maids were wearing until the actual day, but the maids have since hit back in the past 24 hours and said that the garments were chosen specifically by Microsoft over a period of 2 to 3 weeks of them looking at photographs of the girls.
That's right, and I cannot for a minute imagine that somebody at Microsoft didn't sign off on what will the meter maids be wearing, because these things are generally controlled quite tightly, and I find that a bit laughable, really. If you've made a cock-up like that, then you just say, look, hey, we thought you'd like it, you didn't. Sorry about that, we won't do it again, and you move on. You don't try and pretend that, I'm just as aghast as you.
Yeah.
Who knew that meter maids in bikinis would be quite so offensive? My goodness, we never knew anything about it. So,
of course, the offence there is that there are obviously female delegates, and Microsoft has this history of encouraging more females into the tech sphere.
Exactly, and that's a very good idea, because for 50% of the population to be making up only about, last time I checked, it was about 10 or 15% of the IT workforce. There's something odd going on there. It's not that women can't count and don't understand computers. Far from it. The first hacker I ever met was a woman called Barbara, who was a grandmother, and she was incredibly adept at picking out code and spotting mistakes in other people's coding, and was working very hard and earning quite a lot of money, I hope, sorting out Y2K problems back in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And she was knitting jerseys for her grandchildren while she was doing it. So I don't think that there's any biological reason why women can't code, but I do think there's probably a lot of cultural reason. And the sooner we nip that in the bud, the better off the industry as a whole will be.
Indeed. Thanks very much, Paul.
Anytime.
Paul Brislen on Twitter, twitter.com/Paul Brislen, 20 minutes.